Hey everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today we're talking with Jason Saltzman, co-chair of MIT's REAP program and founder of Relief, a transformative platform revolutionizing debt management. He has two successful exits under his belt and over a decade of mentoring founders and teaching entrepreneurship. I'm super excited about this because I think the best way to succeed in business is actually to have a mentor who's already done it. So, with that, welcome, Jason. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks, Brad. I'm happy to be here.
I'm super excited. I mean, you have such a wealth of experience, and I'm a huge believer in learning from what other people have been able to do because, those same patterns tend to repeat themselves. So if we can learn from what other people have done, it makes the path a little bit easier for us as well. So I have a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about, but can we start off with your background? Can you give us an idea of what you did to start your career?
Sure. So I believe a lot in that too. What you just said about learning from others. I mean, I read a lot, and going into my background, I don't come from a traditional, business school, sort of background. I actually never have taken a business class in my life. Um, I'm sort of proud of that. I've been proud of that for years, but it's also been, that support that brings on its own challenges. I think there's a ton of new entrepreneurial classes that are out there right now in university that could, teach you really great things. But for me, I didn't have access to that, and so I kind of learned just by getting in the game. So I started my first business right out of high school, got kicked in the face a lot, as you can imagine. And I kind of never look back. It's one of those things where, a lot of people have these stories about how they got into it, and and these stories seem so structured. It's like, oh, I did this to get here, to get here, to get here. With me, I've just been flailing around all over the place, just surviving, And I did it at a time when I started my first business where, this was over 25 years ago, where, not everybody was doing that like it is today. So my parents, when I brought home my first check, they thought I was like a drug dealer. They're like, how can you materialize money from nothing? Because everybody was like going to school to be a lawyer or a doctor or, what have you. And, that just wasn't, I didn't take that traditional path. So it was sort of like this awkward dance into reality of like self-employment. I started my career in the debt relief space. I opened up a shop that helped people that were falling behind on their credit card bills. I was exposed to sort of like this nefarious world of boiler room, call center, sell everything activity that I hated, but I really liked creating a valuable service for people. It made me feel good, to make money doing something I actually like to do. But the industry was it just was a really crappy industry. So I sort of evolved from that. And along the way, I got into technology. I sort of like learned how to optimize my office space, my surroundings, the paperwork in my office, and that became its own business with another co-founder of mine. We built a company called Seamless Docs. We sold it in 2020 approximately to a larger GovTech company that was buying the technology that we created out of it. And I built an incubator in the middle of sort of like of my career. I built this incubator co-working space called Alley in New York City, and we grew it with the help of large organizations that connected their resources to startups that they wanted to be introduced to. So we connected startups that had like little to no resources to very large organizations that had resources. They just didn't know what to do with it when it came to like iterating and breaking rules and moving fast and all that other stuff. And then COVID hit, and it took everybody's life by surprise, obviously. And I took a step back in my life, and I, looked at my own mortality. I lost my dad, during it. It wasn't due to
Sorry to hear that.
COVID, but it was through it. And and I'm not trying to be morbid with you and,
Yeah,
who's ever
no,
listening here. It's just, I think when you face loss like that, you're like, wow, I'm not gonna, it gives you a really interesting clock on your own mortality. Like, I'm not gonna be here forever. What do I do with my life? What dent do I wanna make? So ultimately, because at a very early age and throughout my career in entrepreneurship, I was introduced to debt relief. I said to myself, like, if I can make something new that doesn't exist right now for people that need help, that are falling behind on their bills or about to, that can change that could change our world, and make it a better place. And I took this idea to some of the smartest engineers that I knew. We reverse engineered how we would do it. That was 3 years ago. We since then have grown it from a seed, institutional venture capital backed company, from seed to Series A, and now we're going on to our next round of growth, where we've experienced, since we've launched the actual technology that we built, the platform in May of 2024, we've had exponential growth, and we're just helping thousands of people right now, which ultimately is a vision realized, which feels good. And I know that's a long-winded answer to your question of my background, but that's how I got here. And in the middle, I've worked on very interesting projects. I work with the State Department. I've been overseas promoting entrepreneurship to places like in the Middle East, which is really cool. And how you introduced me, I most recently became co-chair of an MIT program called REAP. It's a Regional Entrepreneurship Accelerator program where they solve problems in different regions. And it's the 12th year. We'll be entering the 12th cohort, of this program. So I'm super excited about that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, don't worry about that because I was going to probe you about all those questions anyway. I wanted to get that information. I actually find there's a lot of value because you talk to a lot of people and they've achieved something, and there's value in that, and there's value in what they're currently doing. But for me, what fascinates me is the journey from where you start to how you get there, because I think just like being there and understanding some tricks of the trade by having achieved what you've done, it's the process that to me is where sort of all those breadcrumbs are, right? And so I want to unpack that anyway. I would have asked you all those follow-up questions to get in the details there. I love one of the things that you said early on, and it's sort of a pattern in what you did throughout, is the structure versus sort of unstructured, right? So I did go to business school, but I also was sort of a bootstrap entrepreneur too. And the interesting thing about it is that, like you said, there's value in both, right? There's things about going to school and getting some formalized experience and information and structure and systems and things like that. There's real value. At the same time, there's value in that creativity, in that entrepreneurial sort of adaptability where you just figure this is a problem. I got to find a way to solve it. I don't have a framework. I don't have, but I'm going to find a way to solve it. And so sometimes that's a more direct way because you don't have the restrictions of a framework or a structure. And so that balance, I think, is really, really powerful. And, it's cool that you were able to sort of go through some various things, find a way to generate a model that works successfully. But then you also reevaluated and said, listen, what do I want to do with my life? Where do I want to be? What do I want my legacy to be? Because not only does loss teach us about, you know, what our own mortality, it also causes us to take a look at perspective and what value, what really is really important to us.
Yes.
And so I think, all those lessons are sort of packed in there in one place or another. So, a lot of entrepreneurs, regardless of the success they've achieved along the way, usually have hiccups, bumps, mistakes, whatever it is. Is there a particular mistake or mistakes that you made along the way that you think helped shape you and sort of change your mentality about the way you do things?
Yeah, so many, too many to mention. Actually, I'm given this question a lot. It's like, can you as an entrepreneur, as you're well aware, your problems are table stakes, right? The solving of these problems is your job, right? And if you don't look at yourself as a problem solver, then you're looking about it the wrong way, right? Because you have the unique ability to solve unique problems, and that's what creates your business, right? And I think, like, I've been meditating on this thought a lot lately, as I've been growing, because the more you grow, the more uncomfortable you get, right? And it's sort of like I'm coming up with like this saying that I've been using over and over again where, you know, if you get to rare air, which is like any level of success or solving a big problem that people haven't before, or even doing things differently, you're going to face turbulence, right? And you can't be shocked. So again, problems are table stakes. I think what I've learned, mostly out of that is like having the right mindset is everything, right?
Mhm.
Like you can't walk into a room knowing that you're solving problems and get upset or frustrated, as frustrating as it gets. Of course, not everything's going to go your way, so it gets frustrating on its own. But you shouldn't be that surprised. I mean, that's why you're here. I mean, it just makes common sense, but you forget about it when you're in the muck because you're like, oh shit, my world. Because building a business out of nothing is one of the hardest things in the world to do, right? And in self-employment, you know, when you build something out of nothing, which is one of the hardest things in the world to do, what you're often faced with is the reality that one day is going to be really great, followed by the next day, which is going to be the shittiest day of your life. And that is a roller coaster that you can only prepare yourself for if you understand that's the journey that you have ahead of you. And just like you said earlier, like for me, and what I've noticed about anything I do in business or in life, the outcomes are quite unique and they're not that predictable, right? Even though you could set yourself up as much as possible for winning, the outcome usually has a lot of X factors that are involved. And that's why I've sort of been also thinking a lot about lately, like enjoying the process more. Like the devil in the details process. And I've been sort of practicing this in many different ways other than business, like washing the dishes. Like I used to wash the dishes and just be like, I got to get done with this shit. And then
Yep.
the dishes won't come out good, obviously, because you're rushing it. And you don't really get any value out of it either because it's just a frustrating process. So I just been like, I'm like, okay, let me sit here and actually like meditate on it. This is a moment I have to myself. I could put music on. I could chill out. I don't have to get nervous or crazy or make any big decisions. I'm just gonna sit here and wash dishes. And before you know it, you actually like enjoyed it and the dishes came out great. I think business is just like that too. Where you just have to sort of like see what you have ahead of yourself and prepare yourself mentally and just get into it. And a really good book. It's I don't know who wrote it, but it's actually a Japanese sort of like logic, and it's called Ikigai. I'm probably pronouncing it completely incorrectly, and there's a lot of that influence. I read that and it was very calming to me to see something structured that had that sort of ideology embedded in it, because I think that as entrepreneurs we can all learn better ways of going about our day. And I think it starts at that high level, that want to be better, and then you take that want into action and you execute better as a result of it. And so that's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. First of all, I've said oftentimes that as entrepreneurs, what we really are is professional problem solvers. I mean, that is
Mm-hmm.
what we do.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a situation where you don't have a problem to solve, then you probably aren't achieving anything or doing anything
Right.
worthwhile, because
Right.
that is what it is. And the sooner you embrace it and just recognize the fact that it reminds me of a quote, and I'm dating myself a little bit here, but there's a movie, Parenthood, with Steve Martin, that's
Sure. Yeah.
decades old.
Yeah.
It's a classic, but there's a scene in it where they're there with the grandmother, and she's talking. His life is collapsing around him, and he's just like, he's overwhelmed. His kids have issues. He's got issues at work. Everything's going wrong. And she says, you know, some people like the merry-go-round. You get on the merry-go-round and it just goes around. She's like, I always prefer the roller coaster. You get more out of it. I mean, it'll scare the heck out of you, right? But it's up, down, up, down, up, down. But you're also going to get a lot more out of it if you're willing to take those risks and put that time and energy into it. And so I think there's a lot of value in that. And the other thing I love that you said is embracing the journey, because we're so focused on outcomes with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the things that we do. To your point about doing the dishes and feeling like I just got to get through this so I can get to the stuff I really want to do. I spent a number of years in my early when I was first starting my business. I spent a number of years where I wasn't present in things I
Mm-hmm.
was doing outside of the business, because all I could think about is I got to get back to work so I can do the stuff that really matters and get to where I need to be. And it wasn't until I sort of, the same thing, I started to realize, well, geez, I'm going to let my whole life pass me by while I'm trying to do something, only to look back and then be like, well, geez, now I want to kind of enjoy it, and I'm going to have missed it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
It's so important, even in the ugly times, to
Yeah.
embrace what we're doing and understand the importance of the journey and be able to find value and joy, even in little things. It doesn't always have to be the biggest thing. We don't always have to be, but I think we're just so, it's so ingrained in us now from a really young age. And I see it even with my kids coming up through school and everything. The intensity meter starts so young with kids now.
Mm.
um, Everybody's got things going on sooner and sooner and sooner, and you've got to become an expert at things younger
Mm-hmm.
and younger and younger. And I feel like people don't have enough time to just live
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
You can want to achieve things and do things, but I think it's important to enjoy the journey as well. So I fully agree with that.
Yeah. I
So
love that.
yeah, I mean, it just because that's what we're here for. You
Yeah.
got to enjoy the time that you have. You just never know is the
Yeah,
other
Brett.
part of it. So
Yeah, I love everything you said. You're right. You get more out of it in a roller coaster, and that's life. Giving you like what would you rather drink? Like, would you have still water or sparkling? I'm a sparkling guy. It's like that sparkle in life. Comes with that its cost. So I really
yeah,
do love what you said, and I agree with everything that you just said. I think that it's very important for us to really take a look at our lives from a macro view. And I've never reached a level of success like the levels I've reached when everything came to me in a better way, in a more digestible way. I was able to do my job better. I was able to put more enjoyment and love into it. And that love definitely, it definitely shows up in what you're doing, a thousand
yeah,
percent.
yeah. Yeah, it's really funny because when I started doing, podcasting and podcast interviews, I started it from the perspective of the passion for it, because what I said is, look, I have 17 years of experience, and I'm not the most successful entrepreneur who ever lived. I haven't made more money than all the other entrepreneurs, but I still have gone on a journey where I've learned things, I understand things. And one of the things that was intuitive to me is how lonely it can be.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give a voice to other people to let them know that, look, if you're doing something that, first of all, there's value in it. Second of all, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Other people have gone through the same thing. We have dark times, we have good times, bad times, whatever. But it's super important to know that if you're setting out to do something, that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of bravery. And, so I want to encourage people to keep going and not give up if that's what their dream is, because I think it's super important to be able to do the things that we are passionate about and that we love. And the irony is the other thing that I've found, and I don't know if you've experienced this too, but whenever I've pressed really hard on something or I've been in a really rough place because I've had a lot of problems to solve, the harder I tend to focus on it, the harder it is to come up with that answer. As soon as I change sort of gears and I'm doing something else. I'm going for a walk in the park or I'm in the shower. I'm sleeping. Boom. I wake up with this idea that solves the problem. And what's amazing about it is I know it's cliche, but it really seems that every time that you hit one of those low lows, there's a breakthrough literally right on the other side of it. You come through it, you're like, not only did I solve that problem, but I think I preemptively prevented it from ever happening again
Yeah.
because I came up with a solution that's so cool about how to get through this that I've sort of elevated everything and gone beyond that. And there's something really fascinating about that dynamic. I don't know what it is, but it's really, really cool.
Yeah, I sort of think of it in two ways, actually, building on what you just said. The first thing is that um, I think that it's really important to know that when you stress is the byproduct of caring, right? Like, so it's a normal, and I think that you have to you have to allow yourself the creative freedom. And this is something I'm working on for next year. We talk about my New Year, I think about my New Year's resolutions. I think about like where I'm going into. It's like I've been really hard on myself over the years. And I actually, years ago, and I'm going to take an offshoot of this story for a second. I'm going to kind of jumble things up, but it goes
Go
into
for it.
this logic. Um, I, I was focused on my incubator. It was a very polarizing business. And like you, I had this urgency inside myself to connect people together that were feeling lonely. And an
Mhm.
incubator and a co-working space is the opportunity to bring people together. And I was enamored by that. I was so into it. I was obsessed. And I was single. And I found myself, even though I was thriving in this business environment, I was getting all these accolades and I was seeing the byproduct of my work create value for people and the revenue was growing and it was a great thing to experience. I saw myself getting harder as a person, like colder. And so I asked myself, what can I do to make me softer? Because I don't want to be, like you said, I don't want to be this friggin' robot, that like just like executes, even though that sounds great to like investors and shit, everybody wants you to be that workhorse. It's like you have a life to live too. And I was single and I just was like in New York City and I was just living the life, on that level. And there was a lot of fulfillment from business, but my social life was like, basically not there. So my solution, Brett, was to get a dog. I know it sounds crazy, but like, and that my dog, like, a byproduct of slowing down and putting love into something that wasn't a business, it helped me so much better at my actual business because I
Mhm.
entered that my love for the business didn't go away, my talent to execute didn't go away. I got a less obsessive over everything, which like when you're in it, when you sort of like you can't see everything because you sort of get tunnel vision, like another way of saying what you just said. And out of that, not only did my business get better and I got better at making decisions, I found my wife because like I was able to like allow things in my heart, that normally I wouldn't let penetrate. I thank my
Yeah.
dog for all
Mm.
that stuff. And
It's a special dog. Yeah.
it is, and it also is a very cute dog. So when my wife saw the dog, she fell in love with the dog too. I often feel like she, started dating me because she liked my dog so much. But like that's another story, for another time. But I think like the lesson here for anybody who's listening, for what you just said too, is that you have to enjoy things. And business is hard. And you're not going to enjoy every minute of it, and it's going to suck at times. It's going to absolutely suck. There's going to be minutes where, and every single successful person has the same story in different fabrics, different colors, right? I couldn't make payroll. I couldn't raise that round of funding. And we're talking about the biggest businesses known in the world. You look at the outcome on, Forbes, the cover of Forbes, and that makes it look glamorous and easy. But the reality is there's a messy middle, right? That is the reality of what happens during a business. That will kick you in the face over and over again. So you need, for me, being healthy holistically is having other things in your life that you could focus on that bring you joy, and that can temper these hard times, because they absolutely will come. And as a byproduct of you allowing yourself that into your heart, that's going to make you better at business. It's going to make because the one common denominator from every successful entrepreneur on the planet is they didn't stop, right?
Right.
Whatever happened, they kept going. Everybody gets there differently. You could be completely crazy and have this like ridiculous fortitude where you just like are a cold son of a bitch, or whoever the hell you are, that gets you through this time. Or you could treat yourself nicely along the way and enter in elements that don't necessarily have to do with the business, that soften you up, so you're sort of more agile, and you're more of an emotional ball of clay rather than a hard surface that can break. And to me, that's the best way of doing it. Everybody's got their own way. So who's ever listening to this, you're going to do it your way, But I like these conversations too, Brett, because they get to expose our way.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you said there, because I think, first of all, I totally agree. And the fascinating thing about a pet, about an animal like a dog or a cat, is that they're so oblivious. Even a spouse, even a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, kids, they can sense, oh, he's having a bad day because things aren't going well or whatever else. So they're kind of connected, right, to what you're doing in
Yeah,
one
yeah,
way or
yeah.
another. Your pet doesn't care.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
walk through
yeah.
the door and they're as
Yeah.
happy to see you.
I
You're a
know. Lean
hero
in on
every single
that. You
day.
got to lean in on
And
that.
there's something awesome about that. And they say, I guess it lowers your blood pressure, actually. It
Mm-hmm.
can it
Mm-hmm.
actually has physical health benefits
You're right.
to have pets, because every time you look at them, you can't help it. You smile. You know what I mean? It softens you
That's
right
right.
up. No matter how hard you are, you walk in. They did an experiment years and years ago, and I don't remember any of the particulars, but the upshot is what's most important. They took some of the most hardened criminals. I think they were all like murderers and things like that, and they gave them baby kittens.
Oh
And these are
yeah,
people that
I
have
know what you're
killed
talking
other
about. Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
as soon as they had the kitten, they would do anything for their kitten to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that the kitten had its food and got its love. I mean, you see the power of something like
Yeah.
that in an example like that, but that's a really, not only a great story, I think it's really a great lesson for people too. That if you're in a situation where you're starting to feel one dimensional, or you're starting to feel like, you're focused so much on something that you need to gain perspective, you
Yeah.
go get a pet, get a dog, get a cat, something like that. It's amazing how that can shift your whole perspective, and give you a different way of looking at things. So a lot of entrepreneurs and founders dream about starting a business and being able to build it to a point where they can successfully exit. What advice do you have for somebody who's like an early stage founder that wants to be able to, build a business that they can be proud of, and then eventually maybe have a financial payday from?
Well, that's a great question. So, well, one, you know, the it for, the first thing I like to tell people is that it's never as glamorous as what it seems like, in the press release, right? there's always something that went wrong. There's always somebody that's pissed off, you know. So what's a successful vision of an exit to me is not the same for everyone, right? So know that, you know, I wouldn't let my influences be what you read in a you know, an entrepreneurial magazine that boasts successes. I would talk to people about what they actually went through, like this platform that you've created, to sort of understand what it really takes to get there. That's first and foremost, because you know it sucks. I could tell you, like, and everybody has this like thought in their mind, and if you're watching or listening to this and you're like a young person thinking about getting into business because you think that you won't have a boss or like you'll have control of your own destiny, let me be a reality. Let me be let me be a hammer of reality to you, right? You know, you have many bosses, right? Every single person that works for you, you actually work for them because you have to provide their lives value along the way, and you have to figure out that structure. You work for them. Your hours aren't 9 to 5. They are completely every second of the day. Every problem that pops up is your responsibility. When you get investors, if you go that route to get investors, you work for them. That they trusted you with their money, and any customer that you want, whatever that looks like. If you're dealing with a business to business sale, or you're dealing with direct to consumers, as many consumers or customers as you want, those are your bosses. So you have bosses all over the place. So you go from like a very structured one or two boss environment that you directly report to a million bosses, right? Where you have to create the structure. So that's a reality that I'd like you to know right now off the jump. So it's more about preparing for that reality rather than thinking that everything's great. And the other thing that I just want to say is that exits seem wonderful or financial payoffs are wonderful, but that shouldn't be your goal getting into it. There has to be something else, because if that does happen, if you're lucky enough to have that happen, and I've tried dozens of times to have that happen, and I put my heart and soul to each and every try, the chances are you are not going to get that right away. So there has to be something else that's rewarding you for the time that you're spending on this project. For me, in the current project that I'm working on, it's every single person that we can help feeds my soul. It's the financial reward is not there right now. And most startups, you're not going to get paid. You're going to start without paying yourself or have the resources for anybody surround you. So there needs to be something else. So my suggestion is that you focus on why you're doing this, and not so much the dollars or the attachment you have to an outcome of success, because that is definitively not guaranteed.
And that's fantastic advice. I tell my kids all the time, you know, you can make a lot of money, but the most important thing is to follow your passion. Because if you're passionate about something, you wake up in the morning excited to do it for doing its sake.
Yeah.
It's not because of any reward you get. And I'll tell you a funny story from my working days that illustrated this to me really, really clearly. So I was in, a sales role. I was in staffing for about 5 years, and I had the fortune. I worked for a couple of different companies, but I worked for this one company it was really small. There were 5 or 6 of us in the office, and so the owner had hired me, and I came in one morning, and she was so excited. I mean, she was just beaming about this one thing. And she's like, I got to tell you about this. I was on the phone last night with this woman, and I got the perfect job for her. And, I was on the phone with her for 2 hours last night. I told her, like, you got to take this job. There wasn't a single thing that she talked about, mentioned, or even hinted at that had anything to do with the commission she was going to make. She was so excited because she was so convinced that this job that she had as an opening with a company was the best career move for this woman, that it would set her on the path of where she wanted to go and what she wanted to do with her life. And I'm sitting there thinking, and while she's telling me this story, what's going through my head is, I'm okay at what I do, right? I'm smart enough. I'm personable enough that I can talk to people. I'm not afraid to do cold calls, stuff like that. But it's a job for me.
Hmm.
For this woman, it was a passion.
Yeah.
And what instantly occurred to me in that moment is I can't compete with that. Now,
Yeah.
I didn't have to because she was my boss and we worked together.
Hmm.
But what I realized intuitively is I'm never going to own a staffing company because if I'm not that, that's my competition.
Yeah.
And that's the way you need to feel, whether you're a gardener, whether you're going into gardening,
Hmm.
whether you're going into debt relief. I don't care what field you're going into.
Yeah.
If you don't have that passion that
Yeah.
gets you up in the morning wanting to do it for the sake of doing it,
Yeah.
somebody else does, and that's your competition.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
times get tough, you're going to
Yeah.
want to quit. They're not, because
Yeah.
they're going to get up the next day and go, you know what? I don't care. I'm making a difference in some people's lives and I'm going to go do it. I'll worry about the paycheck tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
so
wonderful. That's wonderful. There's a really
it's
great book called, and I don't know if you've ever read it, but bringing up to your audience, so good you can't ignore. So good you can't. What is it? So good you can't ignore me, or is it so good you can't? What is it? It's. I
I
have
haven't
all.
heard of it. So if you have the
Let me
title,
just
yeah.
Google it real quick. I just
Yeah,
want to
no
look it
sweat.
up. Yeah, hang on one second.
Yeah, of
Going off the
course.
cuff for a second here.
No, it's all about the value there. I'd love to know about it. I'd like to read it
Yeah, it's
myself.
so good they can't ignore you. Why skills trump passion in the quest for. Okay, so basically, the thesis is exactly what you said. Like, if and it doesn't matter what it is. They use an example in the book, like a pencil factory. You know, it's like if you're passionate about making pencils, and it's not even so much about what you're doing or who's getting these pencils. That comes along the way of like being an expert. It's just like throwing yourself in something that you care about, and learn and putting your 10,000 hours in. Because once
Right.
you become an expert in some subject, you're going to find all these other things to get excited about too, which I noticed. So it doesn't have to be like this grand idea. I think there's another misconception too when it comes to entrepreneurship. It's like I have to find something that's going to save the planet. And it's like, what if you're just like, you could figure out a way to make people smile?
Right.
What the value does that have in life? Like
Yeah.
that, many entertainment is multiple trillion-dollar industry. Making people smile and giving fulfillment to their lives in different ways is interesting. And honestly, like it's weird to me. Like as a very young, like a kid, I used to like look around at like all the things that we see. I thought to myself, like, how can I build something like that? Because there's a need for all this stuff. And I remember looking at like light posts, like on the street, and being like, wow, these light posts are being mass manufactured.
Yep.
Somebody's doing this and making
Yep.
a gazillion dollars doing this. Um, and reverse engineering, sort of like, how do I get into that? I don't know. Like, it's crazy that I used to think about this when I was like a kid. You know what I mean? But like but that's really relevant because like it doesn't matter what it is. As long
Right.
as you're finding joy in it, you're going to get better at it, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think didn't Steven Spielberg get into movies because he wanted to scare his sister? I mean, I think that
I
was
didn't
the
hear
old
that, but
story
that's
or
really
something. Yeah,
cool. Yeah, that's
yeah, I
really
think
cool.
I think, and that's the whole thing. It got him into wanting to tell these stories, and then he realized, wow, this is really cool. So
By the way, Brett, I'm noticing something here. Not to cut you off, but
yeah,
you and I are a little bit of rivals we got going on. I'm looking at your
I was gonna
background. I'm
say
like,
I
how the
noticed
hell
that
did I
too. You
get
got
on
New
this?
York,
How did you
yeah. I'm
get?
like,
Yeah, but I got more than New York. I have. So it's interesting because like, okay, so like you're a man. So I'm everything you're not, right? Well,
yeah,
first off, I have hair. So
yeah,
I just
that's
want to
true.
mention
Yeah, you got me there. You got me there.
that. But like, we see, and so I had to start with a dig because you're
Yeah,
representing the teams that I grow up to hate over the years. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
I'm a
likewise.
massive Yankee fan,
I
right?
saw the New York stuff. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I won't
Matter of
say
fact,
anything.
I got this one. I have to shout out my boy Coral because he bought me this. He bought me this Ricky Henderson, who was one of my favorite baseball
Oh,
players,
nice.
who just passed away like last
Yeah, it was
week.
sad.
It's super sad at a very young age, 65
Yeah.
years old. But my buddy got me his rookie card signed, which is really cool. That's
Wow.
right there. He's my second favorite player of all time, and that's a ball of my favorite player at all time. And I'm gonna ask you who you think my favorite baseball player of all time is. If Ricky Henderson
Ooh.
is my second, who's my first?
Um, I'm gonna go with Reggie Jackson.
Yeah, that's a great guess. A
Yeah.
little after Reggie. He only had a few
Winfield?
years. No,
Okay. Is it another base stealer
yeah,
or?
no. Donnie Baseball, Don
Okay,
Mattingly.
Mattingly. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
So Don
Yeah.
Manning's my favorite baseball player. My dad had season tickets during the early '90s. They sucked. They were the worst team in baseball. There's actually a really great documentary that's out right now about the craziness that team went through. Steinbrenner got kicked out of baseball. He couldn't
Right.
even like show up to the games or whatever. All the controversy that happened. But the gleaming light when I was a kid was Don Mattingly. And
Yeah.
Don Mattingly, unfortunately, got hurt, but he could have been like one of the best players that ever lived based on his stats and where he was going. And right behind him, after Ricky left the Oakland A's, he went to the Yankees, and I fell in love with this like charismatic base runner that was like the coolest guy, out there. And now I'm watching you, and I'm looking at because I'm a Jet fan.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get nailed from all sides here,
Yeah. Well, look, here's the thing. I've been lifelong fans. My father grew up in Cape Cod. So growing up as a kid, it was always Boston and everything. So I can't be, I've got the championship banners and stuff, but the reality of it is I went through the lean years too. So yes, I enjoyed all the Larry Bird years, but I also suffered through the D Brown
Yeah,
12 win years
yeah,
for the Patriots. I mean, we were masters at snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory for a lot of years.
yeah,
And then, once we got Brady and Kraft, that turned around. So we've had a good run. I mean, the Red Sox obviously broke their curse and all that. And then I got a Yukon Huskies because I'm a Connecticut guy. Um,
I'm gonna give you
but
something cool, by the way. I shouldn't say my fanship. Like I shouldn't say everything on a platform that could be distributed. But one of my wonderful investors in Relief is the Kraft family. So
no
I got
way.
to so Jonathan Kraft, I got to tell him about the business, and he got into our Series A, which I'm super grateful for. So, and by the way, I will tell you this: I hated Tom Brady.
Of course you did.
Who doesn't hate the
Yeah.
GOAT? But I will
Yeah.
tell you without any hesitation that he is the best quarterback that ever lived, and I've grown to really respect the guy.
Yeah.
Who am I? But like, I was just like,
It's
whatever.
crazy. There's some kind of factor, and I don't know what it is, but I think Mahomes has it now where even when he plays badly, they
Yeah,
somehow find ways to win. I could feel why people would hate Tom Brady and the Patriots because they won a number of games that I couldn't believe they won.
right.
And I was a fan and wanted them
Yeah,
to win.
yeah,
So I can
yeah,
only imagine. And that's the way, by the way, I felt about the Yankees for a lot
yeah,
of years.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah, yeah.
drove me
Sure.
nuts.
I
They'd be
know.
down five
Yeah,
runs in the ninth inning and
yeah,
find a way to win. I'm like, how can they
yeah.
keep
I
winning?
know. I
It would
know.
drive me insane,
I know. And then you
And I
blame
had to deal with
everything. The payroll,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
oh, you
yeah,
got to pay
yeah.
the payroll,
You're looking
it's
for
like
anything to
ridiculous.
blame, of
I know.
course.
I'm like, and I'm
But
not, I do not like Patrick Mahomes.
yeah, no, he's not. He's
But
not
I
my
will
favorite either.
probably,
Yeah,
I will. But
yeah.
Brady, I mean, how does a guy show all this stuff and throughout all these years? And not only that, like he is such a inspiration for entrepreneurship too. Like here's a guy that was sitting on the sidelines, underrated, and then gets his chance. And that was like a powder keg waiting to explode. He got on that field, and Drew Bledsoe was your guy. You know, that
Yeah.
was the guy. And if it wasn't for him getting hurt, whatever opportunities that come your way, obviously there's good and bad out of everything. But like the guy gets hurt, Brady goes in, and he's a pow. He
Yeah.
just like puts all that shit on the field. So much so, not only did he win with the Patriots, the guy comes back out of retirement to
Yeah.
play for a completely different team with some usual suspects and win a Super Bowl.
I know.
Like, how the hell do you do that? Like, that is like legendary status. But I also look at Derek Jeter that way too. Like, everybody talks shit
Yep.
about Derek Jeter, and he doesn't
Yep.
have the stats. But if you watched his career, it was frigging magical.
Well, he's a winner. There's guys that play the game on a different level. It's the way Larry Bird used to play basketball too, where they're not just beating you with their physical skills.
Yeah.
They're beating you with the way that they play, their mentality. They're 2, 3 steps ahead
Yeah.
of what's going on.
Yeah.
And you can't teach that.
You
You
can't.
can't teach that. The guys that
Yeah.
have it have it. But I will say, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Bledsoe as well, because what a class act.
Yeah.
Here's a guy that lost his job,
Yep.
to Brady. He comes back in the game in one of those games down the stretch to throw a touchdown when Brady got hurt.
Yep. Yep. I
And,
remember.
he handled everything with total class. And
Yeah.
so I don't think he ever had the same level of fire that Brady had as a competitor. He had more natural ability, I think.
Yeah.
But but regardless, I always had a tremendous amount of respect for him. And I had an opportunity to see the Tom Brady roast. And I thought Bledsoe was magical on that. He was awesome.
So good.
Such a
So
good
good.
dude. And
Yeah. That was
he's
awesome.
just the kind of guy that, you just know, like, he's got really strong character. Always had a lot of respect for that too. So,
Same.
but yeah, at any rate, I mean, that's okay. We can have our friendly sports rivalry. That doesn't affect anything.
100%.
I won't hold it against you.
Yeah.
So, all right,
Same.
let's talk about one more important thing, and that is your understanding and experience with the whole personal debt, realm and industry.
Yeah.
So, what secrets do you know about that? What got you involved in, really wanting to get involved in that field?
Yeah. Well, the secret is that it's actually it's a silent majority secret right now that's happening in the United States. And so we live right now in the era that I'm in as an entrepreneur and that my partners are in, that many, people that are building modern companies are in. It's all data driven. And data shows us that we are in the midst of a consumer recession. And, the stock market can rally and Bitcoin could go up as much as possible. And we could pat ourselves on the back for sort of like a soft landing with the economy, which I think is a good thing overall. But for many Americans, they don't face that same reality as like a wealth management, portfolio manager, or anybody that can put money into a wealth management portfolio, which is like a majority of the country, right? So number one, because of inflation, the systemic effect of that inflation is that the cost of groceries for average Americans in everyday goods has more than doubled over the past 5 years. And a byproduct of that is people are putting more everyday life expenses on things like credit cards, which have a negative effect on, not only are the interest rates completely, predatory in their nature of 25, 29%, they're compounded, right? So like it's and that to me is what I'm seeing is it's horrific, and it's not something that's spoken about openly. But when you start to see divorce rates in America go up and suicide rates in America go up from a statistical standpoint, and understanding that the biggest issues that cause these type of things are financially related, you don't have to put two and two together to see the overwhelming problem that's having. And people don't have access to tools. They have access to apps, that pick them up on their street corner, or food to be delivered in 3 seconds, but there's no app that helps people when they're at their most vulnerable time. They're forced to call these like old businesses that like sort of scare you into these services, and they're call centers that are set up that charge an arm and a leg to help you, and when that help isn't even the best help that's out there. So what we saw an opportunity to do is completely change this through the use of modern technology. We've been able to automate a lot of these services and put it in an app that make it completely accessible for everyone. And what our goal is to get these tools to everyone that needs them. And it's a process that we're going through. We can't help everybody right now. We're very limited. We can only help a fraction of the people that come to the app right now because it's brand new and we have to build on top of what we've already built. But for people that we're helping, which is, almost 65,000 people in a very short amount of time that have onboarded over $3 billion in consumer debt onto the platform, we're helping as many people as possible. And we're seeing up to 70% balance reductions in
That's awesome.
the debt that's being serviced by us. So not only are we making it easier for people, they're getting much better outcomes. And we're able to do it in a very modern fashion that lowers the cost of acquisition. It lowers the cost of servicing these for people. And we pass all that savings to the users. And the future is having a safe, very relevant brand that people can just go to when they're facing these issues. And so that's our solve, that's our passion, that's our drive, that's what gets us up in the morning, and it's absolutely working. It's just a matter of time before we're able to help everybody,
Yeah. No, that's amazing, and it's a great thing that you're doing because it is an epidemic issue. So that's the Relief app, correct?
Yes, yes, that's what
And
we built with Relief.
and so how does it work differently? I know what you're saying. I've heard the ads, I've seen the things where they try to scare you into doing it. Obviously, you have a totally different approach, and it is more technologically advanced. Are there specifics about what you do differently that help people?
Yeah, so first and foremost, like we've completely automated solutions for consumers to not even have to get on the phone to call anybody, right? So like in any instance right now, whether you try to do these things on your own or you hire a company to do them, you have to speak to a human who then has like this, other agenda, right? If you're a debt collector, your agenda is to suck as money out of you as possible. And if you're one of these companies that charge for the services, your job is to sell you on such said services. With an app, you completely have control. So we put all that control in the user's hands, right? So that is the basis of the platform that we built that's driving all these users. So because nobody wants to get on the phone and talk to anybody anymore, right? You don't even want to speak to your significant other on the phone. You just want to text them. So we've completely automated that for the consumer, which has never been done before. It's the first of its kind. And it took a really long time and a lot of resources to build that and a lot of care, right? And a lot of studying with the users themselves, and also just like giving them dignity along the way. The app has been built not only to encourage them to take care of their situation, but also there's moments where we let them know from a behavioral perspective that they're just not alone,
Yeah.
which, as you can imagine, like people feel very isolated in this
Yep.
situation. I mean,
Hmm.
the world is against you. You feel like a complete piece of shit,
Hmm.
because like you basically feel like you failed at life. Whereas like 1 in 3 Americans have an account that's going into collections right now.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about it. There's a massive amount of stigma that's around the subject matter. So one of our goals is just to make people feel good again, like by letting them know they're not alone. And then these solutions we've made so simple that like ultimately it shows you like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, we want to save people's lives here, Brett.
I
It's
love that.
Yeah.
I really do. I think it's so powerful, and I think hitting it from not just the dollars and cents and the sort of logistical side of it, but also from the human side of it, the
Yes.
emotional side of it is so important because I think that part often just gets totally ignored. And when you're doing anything in your life that you don't feel good about, it affects your own self-esteem. It affects the way
That's
you
right.
look at other things, and it shrinks your options. You start
Yeah.
That's when you start to
You're
think
right.
about
That's
some of
right.
these negative things. And so I love what you're doing there. I think it's super important. Where can people find you? Where can people find the app? Where can people find your products and services?
Yeah, so if I love helping founders. So if you're thinking about building a business, feel free to reach out to me directly. My Instagram is at Jason Saltzman. My Twitter is reversed. It's at Saltzman Jason because the other Jason Saltzman, a world renowned cyclist, has that. Jason, let's work a deal out. I'd love to we'll exchange so we have some uniformity in our lives. And for the service, for the automated, for relief, what you could find us on relief.app, but it's fully mobile, so you could find it in the App Store. Just look up relief on the apps, either app store, either Android or iOS.
Awesome. Thanks for that. All right, I have one last question. I've got to ask because I always want to know what everyone's going to say, and that's what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
I think we talked a lot about it. It's focused more on the journey than the outcomes, and treat yourself as nice as you can because markets are tough, and if you're going to build something that doesn't exist or even do something different at your job, it's not going to be easy. So know that, with all that friction you have around you, you're going to have to look yourself in the face and give yourself encouragement. So start right away by being nicer to yourself. And I think the outcomes will surprise you.
I love that. I think the self-love thing is so important. We're so hard on ourselves just in general, and as entrepreneurs, it could be even worse. A problem comes up, we're beating ourselves up because we didn't, foresee it. We didn't anticipate it.
Yep.
Look, life is dynamic, business is dynamic. You can't always predict everything that's going to happen, and it's super important I think we wouldn't often treat other people like we treat
I
ourselves,
say it all the
you
time.
know?
Yep.
And the reality of it is we really need to. It's super important that we take care of ourselves as well. So I think that's great advice. I had a blast. Thanks again so much, Jason, for sharing all your insights, great tips with us. Visit relief.app for debt questions and personal finance, and jasonsaltzman.com for entrepreneurship content. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And as always, remember, no matter what you want for your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.